My wife and I got married about 5 years ago. The two of us hit it off super well, and we always loved to do nerdy things together. She and I were both gamers. We loved anime and sharing our love of nerd culture with each other. She meant the world to me, and I always thought things were good. We fell in love really fast, about 3 years before we got married. In fact, I met her at a convention, and I thought that we would be a match made in heaven. We started off talking about our love for Legend of Zelda, to even discussing the latest One Piece chapter. Some people look for the one, their player too, their everything. For me, that was her. We got married a little fast and had this really nerdy wedding where we even encouraged people to dress up. However, we didn't get a chance to go to conventions. Due to our jobs and how much they cost, we rarely had a chance to. However, I wanted to make our 5-year anniversary special. I didn't make a lot of money, but I made enough to take care of her. I surprised her for her birthday with tickets to one of the biggest comic cons out there. It was one that people dreamed of going to. She was ecstatic, and I was so excited to go. Now, I never did well with women. In fact, I could never really pick up when they actually liked me until after. It was only after the fact that I realized it. Even with my wife, it took me 3 long conversations on Discord to realize that she had the hots for me and wanted to get to know me better. When we went to the convention, things were great. A gal dressed as slave Princess Leia kept gushing over my stormtrooper costume that I put together at the last minute. After she left, my wife pulled me to the side, talking about how that gal was all over me. I told her I didn't even realize it. I was so bad about reading the room that I didn't pick up the signs. My wife was a little bit frustrated, but we continued on with our day. It was a 3-day convention, after all. We went to this meetup, and that's when he came in. He was dressed as Han Solo. My wife, who was also dressed as Princess Leia, started talking to him. The two of them started talking a lot more, getting closer. I stepped in and mentioned I was the husband. The guy said it was nice to meet me, but refused to make eye contact. After he left, I confronted my wife. She said there was nothing going on, and he was just a nice guy that liked my outfit. She was the bigger Star Wars fan, so naturally, she liked gushing out. I brushed it off, thinking it was nothing. The weekend continued. The next day, my wife woke up sick and exhausted. I said that I would go down and be back later on. I left, but part of me couldn't shake what happened the other night. I chalked it up to my own imagination. However, my wife wasn't answering my messages. We still had one more day before the end of the convention. I bought her something to give to her after I got back up. When I approached the room, I heard sounds. Moans and such. I dismissed it, thinking it was maybe my wife. When I opened the door, I saw her there, looking at me. It was clear she did something. I confronted her, but she said that there was nothing. I looked around, trying to find someone. There was nothing. I dismissed it. The convention passed. My wife grew distant. She worked longer hours and came home exhausted. I asked if she wanted to watch a movie together, but she would tell me that she was busy. I couldn't shake the moans that I heard. While my wife showered, I saw her Discord notifications were turned off. She never turned these off during the duration of our relationship, so something was amiss. I opened her phone, surprised that the passcode was the same, and I began to read them. They were messages from the guy that she met at the Star Wars meetup. He kept flirting with her, and they exchanged pictures. He even mentioned he wanted to roleplay with her, and she was all about it. I angrily set the phone down and pretended like I never saw anything. My wife asked me if anything was wrong, and I lied and said I was fine. However, it was not fine. I researched how to get a divorce. This would be quite hard to serve, but I wanted to humiliate her and show her that I knew everything. I told her about another convention and how I wasn't going to be able to make it to this one, but she could go. Her eyes lit up slightly. even though we wouldn't be together. This was my partner, someone that I wanted to be with forever, who just tossed me away. It was a gut punch, but I couldn't let her on. On the day of the convention, I followed my plan. I did some research on this guy. They actually worked pretty closely together. I went to the convention and found them, of course, right in front of her favorite voice actors. That's when my plan came in. I watched them get in line and hid behind them. I wore a mask to hide my face, but watched them like a hawk. When they got closer, the voice actor asked her about how she was. She pulled the man closer and said she was having a great day. They shared a kiss, and then, that's when I made my plan. I moved right in between them, pulling off the mask and looking directly at my wife. She dropped her hand and looked at me. She asked what I was doing. I argued with her, saying that I caught her with him and that he cheated on me with him. She said that wasn't true, but I got the Discord messages, putting them right down on the table. The other attendees watched, shocked that I would even do something like this. However, I didn't want to let this go. I announced to everyone there that my wife was a cheater, and she cheated on me with this guy, whom she also met at a convention. The celebrity stood up, said that he needed a break, and then disappeared. My wife's eyes filled with tears, and she begged me to listen to her. However, I couldn't. I told her that she lied to me, saying she was going alone. I told her that I knew about the meeting up, about the late nights at the office gaming with the girls. I called them one day and asked. They said they didn't hear a gaming night since they were busy preparing for the holidays. My wife stood there, embarrassed. She told me that she wanted an open relationship and thought about asking me. I told her that I didn't want to listen to this. She was upset as well that I stepped in like that. However, I knew that she had messed up. We got home, and I grabbed my things. Staying in a hotel, I grabbed all of my things and contacted an attorney so that we could get the paperwork ready to be filed. She tried to convince me to stay and that we should have an open relationship. She tried to say that I could sleep with other women and she could sleep with men. I never wanted that. I wanted her. She was my player too, my everything. My actions got traction. Someone recorded me embarrassing my wife and showed it all over social media. I proceeded with the divorce, and I got the house and all our things. I sold it, though, because I didn't want to be reminded of the painful memories of the time we shared together. I don't know what happened to my wife. The nerd scene knew all about this, and it was a huge stink on Twitter and other places for a while. Her boss eventually found out because of what they saw, and I'm not sure if she stayed or not. Frankly, I don't care. My quest for love continues, but not with a cheating woman like her. Op. That is awful, and I'm sorry you had to lose someone who meant the world to you. That open relationship was definitely your wife's way of getting forgiveness for cheating. You never wanted that, and she should have listened to you. I know she meant a lot to you, especially since you two were huge nerds and gamers together. From what you described and the messages, it sounds like he was ready to take it all. I know it's painful, but I hope you're able to recover and still enjoy your hobbies in the future. Now on to our next story. My wife, 32 female, and I, 35 male, have always wanted kids. We tried our hardest to make this a dream. She mentioned to me early on, when we started dating, how she wanted to be a mom. This was 10 years ago, and I told her that if we got married, I would make that dream a reality. She said she would like that, so 5 years into dating, we got married. It was a small ceremony, but my wife and I weren't the showy types. We liked to keep things simple. I had a job at a bank, and she worked as a graphic designer at a company. I know she and my best friend Greg worked together because he was the marketing director. He had a girlfriend that he loved deeply, and we would go out on double dates together. Greg also knew how much I wanted to be a father and constantly supported me. My wife and I tried, and for a while, we did everything we could to get pregnant. From different home remedies to even talking to doctors. However, no matter how much we tried, it didn't work. I was desperate, and while we didn't want to do IVF, if we could, it almost came down to it. My wife was growing upset because of this. She told me to take a sperm test, but I was told I was healthy as a horse. She was healthy too. One night, after talking, I said that I would pray and see if maybe God would answer. I'm not religious, but I did it for her. Perhaps it was out of desperation or something else. Then, about a month later, my wife missed her period. We thought it was it. We took a pregnancy test, and she was pregnant. We were so happy about this, and I was ecstatic. However, we lost it shortly after. My wife was devastated, but I told her that we would try again. We always could. We tried again a couple months later. She did get pregnant, but then she lost it. We're not sure why. I told her the third time the charm. So it was. On our third attempt, she was pregnant. The doctor monitored her like a hawk to make sure her baby lived. We went through the first 8 weeks with no problem. We held our breath as she went through the first trimester. She made it. By week 12, the doctor believed we were in the clear. He also told us that we'd be having twins. To think, after all of this trying, all of these attempts, we finally had twins. I told Greg, and he was happy. My wife was glowing. Everything seemed like it was perfect until week 24. My wife woke me up in the middle of the night, panicking because she didn't feel the babies moving or kicking. She cried out in pain and raced to the bathroom. She went to the bathroom, and she reported there was blood. We immediately went to the ER. Sure enough, she lost the babies. The doctor had to dilate her to evacuate them, removing them from the uterus. They induced partial labor into her. After it was over, my wife was hollow, like she lost a part of herself. After that, everything changed. She didn't want to try again, not after the last time. It traumatized her. It killed me inside. I wanted to help her, to be there for her. I took her out to dinner, double dating with Greg and his girlfriend. It surprised me that Greg wasn't engaged, but he told me that they were in the process of getting a house so they could move out of their place. After that, my wife drowned herself in her work. I tried to get her to come down and watch movies or go out, but she didn't want to. Greg was busy as well. I thought about asking Greg if my wife was acting all right, but he said she was just a little stressed out. They had a huge deadline to work with. My wife was constantly gone, and when she came back, she seemed almost exasperated with me. I asked her what I did wrong, and she said nothing. I saved some money and asked her if we should try IVF. She said no, she didn't want to. Well, it made me upset because it felt like I was the problem. Maybe I was, but I even had doctors check me out to make sure everything was okay. My wife became different, almost like a shell of a person. She would hide her phone, becoming more secretive. One night, while she was showering, I needed to find my phone. I pressed to find my Android function. A phone rang, but it wasn't mine. It was my wife's, which she left in a bag. Curiosity got the better of me when I opened it. I turned it off, but I saw text messages from Greg on there. They didn't show up on the lock screen, but they were there when the home screen appeared. They were flirty texts. I opened up the rest of the messages. Sure enough, they were more of the same. Pictures were sent, and my wife even said Greg could put a baby in her. Greg mentioned that his girlfriend was nice, but he could make her dreams come true of being a mom. It disgusted me. I spent all this time with that dream, only to hear my best friend doing this. I had to get back at them. One night, while she worked late, I set up my plan. I placed an order for a marketing strategy using a fake name. I came after hours, despite them saying they were closed. The door was open and I walked inside. When I got to the floor where she worked, I heard sounds. They were having sex. I stepped inside, red in the face, as Greg literally said to my wife he would put a baby in her. I was livid. I told my wife she was a cheater, and I knew everything. She begged and pleaded with me to listen, saying that Greg could be a surrogate for them, but I was disgusted. She cheated on me, all because she wanted something that I couldn't give to her. When I got home, I packed my things and got a hotel. I took video evidence and sent it to her boss, firing both of them after the divorce went through. I got everything. My wife cheated, and I spent all this time thinking it was a problem when, really, it was her. I sold the house and got a condo far away, working at another bank. I'm not dating anymore. I don't want to after all that happened. Greg and I aren't friends anymore. I told his girlfriend, and they broke up. I don't know what happened to Greg and my wife. Maybe they got together. Maybe not. All I knew was with no house and no job, their lives were much harder. Opie, this is awful, and I'm so sorry that happened. You did your best. You couldn't help it, and she blamed it all on you when it wasn't your fault. Cheating after having two stillborns is messed up. I understand grief, but this is not the way to go about it. She should have waited to try again, but I guess she chose infidelity instead. I'm glad you and Greg aren't friends anymore. If a friend did that to me, I'd cut things off right away. It's gross that he would pretend to be your friend and act like you're cool just to get close and have sex with your wife. He's saying that he would put a baby in her, and all that is also really gross. It really stinks that you found happiness, only for someone to just treat you like that. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. My wife and I have been together for 20 years. We met in our freshman year of high school, and we have been together ever since. She and I both lost our virginity to one another. We went to prom together, and we even went to the same college after graduation. We got married right after we graduated from college, and we settled down to start our life together. Having a family was always something we were looking forward to, so once we had good jobs, we decided to start. Fast forward about 11 years, and we have two kids. We own our own home, and we are on a fast track to retiring early so we can travel and do all of the things we never had the chance to. I thought that we were living the dream life. All of that came crashing down when my sister-in-law was diagnosed with lung cancer. She was my wife's best friend, and she took it very hard. She was with her every step of the way while she was fighting as best as she could, but in the end, she passed away. It was a huge blow to the entire family, myself included. It's such a cliche, but she was just a beam of light in the world. My wife took it harder than anyone else. My sister-in-law was whom my wife would go to when she needed to talk about anything. They would go shopping together, and they knew everything about each other. I was there for my wife while she grieved the loss, and I helped her get over the worst time of her life. After about 6 months of mourning, my wife started to get back to herself. She had all of my sister-in-law's journals and her notebooks, and she read through all of them while she was grieving. I couldn't even begin to process the types of emotions she must have been feeling, so I just tried to be supportive and lend an ear when she needed it. One thing that got to my wife was feeling like she hadn't done anything with her life. Her sister was taken way too soon, and through the journal entries, my wife realized that her sister felt like she didn't get to do enough in her life. I guess when my wife read all of that, she thought that her sister would have wanted her to do the opposite. She told me that she had been inspired to start living. She wanted to travel, go skydiving, and just enjoy the life that she had while she had it. I wholeheartedly agreed with it. That's why I had been working 60 hours a week since I graduated college, so we could try to retire early. Over the next few weeks, she started doing more things. For example, she started taking pottery classes because she'd always been interested in it. She had been teaching herself how to rock climb because she wanted to free climb, and she even scheduled a bungee jumping excursion for her and her son. She seemed to be leaning into this new lifestyle. I didn't think anything of it. I was happy for her because she was recovering from her sister. One night after she came home from the climbing gym, she was acting off. Before that, she had been very upbeat and excited about everything while she took on this new lease on life. After dinner, when the kids were in their rooms, she pulled me out to the patio where we shared a couple of glasses of wine and looked at the stars. Toward the end of our conversation, she brought up the possibility of both of us having a hall pass. For those of you that don't know, a hall pass in a committed monogamous relationship is a one-time opportunity for both of the partners to have sex with someone outside of the relationship. I was completely shocked by what she had suggested. It felt like it came out of nowhere, so I asked her about why she was bringing it up. She assured me that she loved me, but she felt like she might have been missing out on a part of her life because she had only ever been with me. She tried to say it in a way where I wouldn't be hurt, but it was impossible not to feel horrible when she said that. I told her that I wasn't supportive of the idea. She and I had been married for 20 years, and I didn't understand why it was a problem all of a sudden. I didn't want to sleep with anyone else, and I wasn't okay with her sleeping with anyone else. We were about to go back inside, but I stopped and I asked her if there was someone she had been interested in sleeping with. She was hesitant to tell me the truth, but after a few moments, she told me that there was another person who went to the climbing gym that she was attracted to. She told me that he had always been flirty, and recently he asked her out for drinks. I was assured that she said no, and that she would tell him that she was married, but I still went to bed that night with a sour taste in my mouth. It took a few days for me to come to terms with what she had suggested. I was unbelievably hurt by it, but after some time, I forgave her, and we carried on as if the conversation never happened. After a week or so, she told me that the climbing gym offered a class to start working outdoors and that she wanted to sign up for it. One Saturday, she went out early in the morning with the class. At least that's what I thought was happening. Our daughter had been entering those years where she started lying to us about where she was going so she could go to parties and hang out with friends we didn't approve of. So we told her to leave her location on Snapchat Maps so we could verify she was where she said. That same afternoon, our daughter was supposedly going over to a friend's house, so I checked the maps to make sure she wasn't lying. Everything was good on our daughter's end, but I noticed that my wife's avatar was in the heart of the city. I was a little confused because I had been told that she was going to a park about 30 minutes outside of the city. I zoomed in on the location and saw that she was at a bar. I tried to rationalize it like she was just hanging out with some of the other people from the climbing gym after they got back from their climb, but I had a sinking feeling in my gut that I couldn't ignore. I remembered what she had said about the guy from her climbing gym asking her to go out for drinks. I didn't think it was that far of a stretch to wonder if she was there with him. I was home alone in the bar that she was at, and it only happened to be about a 15-minute walk from the house, so I grabbed the dog and we took a walk. I kept my eyes on the map every so often just to make sure she was still there and she wasn't leaving. When I got to the bar, I looked in through the windows and I saw my wife sitting at a table with a man. They were both leaning close together and smiling from ear to ear as they chatted. The man reached across the table and grabbed my wife's hand, and my wife let him. Of course, hand holding isn't necessarily cheating, but it was an indication that maybe there was something more going on. I went home before my wife saw me there, and I waited for her to get back. The entire time I waited, I didn't know if I was going to confront her about it or try to dig around on my own. She came home, and before she even said anything to me, she went right to the shower. I tried to grab her to have a conversation, but she just told me that she was gross and sweaty from climbing. That solidified in my head that something happened while she was with that man. She had dropped her gym bag down near our bed, and I noticed that her phone was still inside. I pulled it out and looked through it to see if I could find any information about who that man was. I searched the name of the bar in her text messages and I found a chat between her and an unsaved number. I scrolled back to the beginning of the conversation, which happened to be about a week before she asked me about the hall pass. I skimmed through the rest of the messages looking for keywords that would indicate an affair. Eventually, I found a few exchanged pictures and some explicit messages. Then I saw the plans for them to get together at the bar. They even came up with a lie to tell me and his partner together. I had no idea who that guy was, but I was able to find out by looking through the climbing gym social media. They had posted a few pictures with some of the clients, and he was clearly in one. He was tagged in it and everything. I did some digging and found out that he was married with a newborn baby. I was disgusted by what I saw. Hurt doesn't even begin to describe the pain that I felt. I had been with my wife for 20 years and she was willing to throw all of that away because she wanted to sleep with another man. I was furious and I was so disgusted by the foul actions both of them had done. At the end of their message chain, with no context, was the name of a restaurant with a date and time. A week had passed since I discovered my wife was cheating on me and I had come up with a plan to catch her in the act. While I was thinking about it, I realized that the wife of her affair partner deserved to know as well. When the day of the meeting was supposed to take place, I sent his partner's wife a dozen roses with the information for the restaurant on the card. I hoped that it would be a way to trick her into thinking he had a surprise planned for her. I waited outside of the restaurant and I saw her head toward it. I followed her inside and we both noticed our partners holding hands at the same time. She rushed right over to him and started yelling at him in front of everyone. My wife was shocked to see me, but she jumped up and tried to tell me that it wasn't what it looked like. Then I asked her to explain the text messages, and she went silent. I told her that I would be ending everything between us, and that she could expect to see me in court. We spent the next 8 months in a divorce battle over what happened. The biggest issue that we had was custody. We both wanted primary custody of our children, but in the end we were given joint custody. I was able to keep the house, and she was entitled to no spousal payment from me. Her affair partner was also divorced, and he was forced to pay child support and alimony to his ex. My ex and I only recently finished the divorce proceedings and were finally done with each other. I honestly don't know what to do from here. I had only been with one woman and she stabbed me in the back and I'm not sure how to move forward. Opie, I can't believe you went through something like that. Understandably, your wife was curious about experiencing new things after her sister's death. That's obviously where the idea came from. It seems like she was grieving in some way, but when you told her you weren't comfortable with the hall pass, she should have respected it. It's interesting to see how quickly she disregarded you saying you were uncomfortable with it. I think she must have been feeling guilty about even considering it, otherwise, she wouldn't have offered you the opportunity to do the same thing she wanted. Not only did she cheat on you, but she cheated on you with someone who just had a baby, and that's truly horrendous. Not one, but two families were ruined because of the relationship they had. I hope you're able to move on past this. I know it's going to be difficult after dedicating so much of your life to someone else, but hopefully you'll find someone who will truly value you and your family. Now, let's move on to our next story. My girlfriend and I had been together for 3 years before my entire world fell apart around me. I thought that she was the one for me, and I even planned on marrying her. However, she cheated on me with my cousin. To begin with, she and I met at a nightclub 3 years ago. She was the hottest woman there, and I didn't think I stood a chance at getting far with her, but I had to try. Surprisingly, she was interested in me, and we went out the next day. We had been together ever since. She moved into my apartment a year and a half after we started dating. It seemed right, and I didn't question if it was too soon or not, because I was head over heels in love with her. My cousin who used to live down south ended up accepting a job position in New York where we lived. I was able to talk to my building manager to get a decent apartment set up for him since he couldn't come to the city to look for one himself. I was stoked for him to be close by. We had always been good friends when we were younger, and we often played games online together. I thought it was going to be nice having family close by. Once he was all settled, and we would hang out with each other quite often. He would come over to our apartment because I had a nice gaming setup and we would play. He was never shy about letting me know he thought my girlfriend was insanely attractive. He was my cousin, so I never thought he would act on any of his feelings, so I would laugh it off and agree with him. I never noticed anything going on with them while I was around. She wouldn't sit next to him, they wouldn't really even talk much, and they seemed to respect each other's personal space. So, a few months after he moved in, I was grabbing coffee with a friend. I thought it was just going to be me and one of my college buddies, but he actually showed up with his new girlfriend. I was a little shocked to see him there with her because she was actually my girlfriend's work friend. We had tried to set them up at a party, but we didn't think they were hitting it off very well. Apparently, they had been keeping things low profile because they didn't want to put any pressure on their relationship. I thought it was so funny that they were together, and I wanted to surprise my girlfriend with that news because I knew she'd love it. I texted her and told her that she should come to the cafe because there was a surprise I wanted her to see. I got a message back shortly after that she couldn't because she was hanging out with her friend. The friend she told me she was hanging out with was the one sitting right across from me at the cafe. Obviously, she was lying about what she was doing, but why she was lying was what I couldn't understand. I ended up lying to my friends and telling them that my girlfriend had a migraine and needed me to bring her some medication, so I left the cafe and went right home. When I got there, she was nowhere to be seen. However, I could see that she had makeup on the bed, and she had clearly tried on a couple of outfits. I was really nervous that something was going on that I didn't know about, and I needed to talk to someone about it. I walked down the hall to talk to my cousin. There was loud music playing in the background, but I knocked on the door for a minute until he heard me. I heard a lot of shuffling around, but he opened the door a moment later. He tried to laugh it off by telling me that he had company and that he would come over later. Again, I had no reason to think that my girlfriend was cheating on me with my cousin, so I didn't assume it was her in there. I didn't assume it was her until I saw a shirt that I bought her for her birthday on the arm of the couch behind my cousin. I played it cool and I nodded my head and went back to my apartment. As soon as I got there, I looked around for any other signs that she was cheating. I ended up going into her laptop and looking through her Facebook messages with my cousin. Doing that completely broke my heart. I saw that my cousin had reached out to her and asked what it was about me that she liked so much. She told him that she thought I was funny and had a good personality, but he replied saying that I didn't seem like her type. He told her that he was her type. My girlfriend didn't disagree. They were extremely flirty, and at one point she messaged him the classic, just got out of the shower message. After that, they sent a couple of suggestive pictures with some very sexual messages. Earlier that day, my cousin had messaged her that he couldn't stop thinking about her and that he needed to be with her. He told her to come up with some excuse to go to his apartment, and she did. I knew it was over between my girlfriend and I was going to be cutting my cousin off from my life entirely, but I was definitely going out there little tryst to everyone I knew. I took screenshots of everything that I saw, sending them to myself, so I had it in case my girlfriend tried to lie. Luckily, my name was on the lease and hers wasn't, because she moved into my apartment, so I would at least get to kick her out. She came home a few hours later, and right away I told her to get out. She was confused, but I told her that I found out about her and my cousin, and that I wanted her out of the apartment, or I would file a legal complaint. I left for the night and told her that she had 48 hours to leave. While I was away, she and my cousin had both called me dozens of times, but I ignored every single one of them. While I was gone, I gathered all of my relatives into a group chat and I told them everything about what happened. Everyone was so disappointed in my cousin for doing what he did. His parents were, even in the chat, they all apologized profusely, even though they didn't do anything. Shortly after, I got a bunch of messages from my cousin where he was calling me a coward and telling me that he had members of the family messaging him and telling him that he was a scumbag. I didn't really care, he was a scumbag. My girlfriend and I had a lot of the same friends, so I put all of them in a group chat and told them about what happened as well. They were all completely shocked by what they heard, and they were on my side. While I was talking to them, a couple of the girls in the chat told me that my girlfriend was trying to call them to ask for a place to stay. They felt bad, but they said no because they didn't believe that what she did was right. I went back 2 days later, and my girlfriend was out of the apartment. I had no idea where she'd gone because all of our friends had decided to ghost her. I found out that she ended up staying with my cousin. However, their personalities clashed quite a bit, and he ended up kicking her out after a week. From that point, I have no clue where she went. I guess I learned that you really can't put your trust in just anyone, not even family. Opie, it seems like your cousin was close to you, and I'm sorry you had to cut someone from your family off that you cared about. It's such a shame that he would value sleeping with a woman he didn't really even care about over his relationship with his family. Your girlfriend was clearly already interested in him if she was able to give in to what he was saying so easily. Karma got her in the end. I can't believe how coincidental it was that she lied about being with a friend that you were with. At least you know you have the support of your friends who all took your side when you told them what happened. It's good that they ghosted her because she didn't deserve any sympathy for her actions, and it seems like she might have been looking for an after. I hope that you can move past this and carry on with your life without worrying about the same thing happening again. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. My wife, 34 female, and I, 40 male, were married for 5 years. We were both very active together, going on hikes and gym dates. We lived near the beach, so every morning we got to run together right by the water. The 7 years of our relationship were blissful. The only family we had at all was my MIL. She and my wife were very close. They had a good relationship, and I was thankful she had a good role model. I basically grew up on the streets, always kicked out of my stepfather's house. I had absolutely no family besides my wife. I really depended on her, but not as much as I depended on myself. I had no choice to become self-reliant, so I swore if anything ever happened between us, I would stay strong. No woman would be the end of me. Of course, I met some pretty terrible women, but I had no idea my wife would fail me too. Whenever I went to work, my wife would go on long-distance walks without me. Sometimes she walked 25,000 steps in a day. She could walk downtown, around a few blocks, and back home. Sometimes she stopped at the street vendors or the cafe for a treat. She usually texted me at least one little update or photo about her day, so I knew what she was up to and that she was safe. She started skipping some days, and I noticed. When I got home, she wasn't as excited to see me. She wasn't as talkative at dinner, and just seemed like there was something on her mind. I was already thinking she met someone. Something in my gut told me she did. One night she was drawing something, but didn't want to show me what it was. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me, so I looked at my wife's drawing while she was in the shower. It was a perfect sketch of AP, although I didn't know that at the time. It was just some man I never saw before, but of course I was worried. As soon as she got out of the shower, I asked her who it was and added more questions onto that, like why she'd been distancing herself. She played dumb and said this was why she didn't want to show me. She didn't want me to worry about it. It was just a guy she saw on one of her walks. Since she'd been acting strange and just drew another man's face, I asked her if I could see her phone. She didn't want to give it to me and said I was acting crazy. I told her if she had nothing to hide, she could show me her phone and nothing would come of it. Instead, she said I was on a power trip and stressed about nothing. The sun was setting as she left the house for a walk. I tried asking her to stay, but she refused. She was gone for hours. When she came back, she handed me her phone. Of course, it was cleared of anything, but what I found interesting was that she said she was going on a walk, but there were only 500 steps on the app that day. So did she get in someone else's car? Or go into a neighbor's house? Just before she fell asleep, I asked her what she did while she was out. She sighed dramatically and told me she was walking the whole time. So I asked her if that was true, why she only had 500 steps that day. She was silent, but I could feel her lock up and her breathing became weird. I really freaked her out when I said I pulled up her recent trips on maps and found an address. She started to admit she did get a ride with someone, but they dropped her off in some random neighborhood where she sat on someone's porch for hours without them knowing. Just then, her phone on the nightstand popped up with a message. She knew I was going to ask about it, so she tried to avoid that by taking it to the bathroom. I asked her to leave her phone with me if she had nothing to hide. She said she shouldn't have to do that and said I was being controlling. I told her I wasn't an idiot and knew she was seeing someone else. She was surprised that I said it. She started shaking and I could see that her heart rate was through the roof. She admitted she had become friends with that man she drew. I asked if that was who just texted her. She immediately said no, that was her mom. I asked if I could see it and she freaked out. She said she was trying to be honest with me, but I wouldn't believe her. I asked again to see her phone, so shakily she unlocked it and quickly dismissed the new message to pull up the thread with her mom. I took her phone and went back to the list of messages and only caught a glimpse of it before she pulled her phone back. It was too late though. I saw it was from someone programmed as friend and he said I won't have you again, which was pretty incriminating. When I told her I saw it and what it said, she was furious and didn't know what to do next. There were no words. She started packing her luggage in the hopes that I would ask what she was doing or try to stop her. I just let her pack until she broke down sobbing and asked me to forgive her. I asked if she was asking forgiveness for cheating, and she said yes. I told her I promised myself I would never forgive a cheating woman. She just started crying and packing all over again, wailing like this was my fault. She stopped once again to ask me to forgive her and forget about this because she would never see him or talk to him again. I told her that wasn't going to happen and she needed to leave. I had to call her mom to come pick her up from our marital home because our marriage was over and she cheated on me. She could be heard in the background freaking out and denying it. Her mother came confused and disappointed. I was the one to load most of her stuff while they cried. Her mother told me she was sorry and looked at her daughter like she was a disappointment. I heard 3 weeks later that she was kicked out of her mom's for refusing to do anything at all. It's like she broke after losing me. Meanwhile, I bought a puppy and have started dating again. While her cheating hurt, it's not the worst thing that could have happened. I still have my heart and self. She didn't take me down with her. OP, I am so sorry your wife cheated on you. You noticed her behavior, but the most credible evidence was her app. You were very clever to check that, and even though she tried to clean her phone, the truth always comes out. Her phone lit up when AP messaged and you were destined to see it. I am proud of you for deciding ahead of time to stay strong and refuse to let any woman bring you down. There's never a good reason to forgive a spouse who's cheated on you. It's a recipe for resentment, comparisons, and grudges. Once this act has been committed, it cannot be undone. A lifelong happy relationship requires two wise, honest, and selfless individuals who understand that life isn't perfect and the world doesn't revolve around them. Find one person who suits you and vow to protect and honor them. I wish you the best of luck. Thank you for sharing your story. Now, let's get into our second story for today. My wife. 42 female, loved animals, and worked with them every day at a pet store rescue center. We lived over an hour away from a large zoo. I, 46 male, was surprised we didn't go to the zoo a little more often. We were only there twice, and the last time was years ago. Work kept us busy, so we didn't usually stop to treat ourselves or take any trips out of town. 9 years into our marriage, my wife started spending even less time at home, claiming she was working overtime because her boss was sick. Then there were other random excuses until I just accepted that I could only see her just before bed each night and on the weekends. She always made me feel like everything was great between us, and she was happy with our relationship. One day while she was at work, she texted me, "I can't wait to see you," but she quickly corrected it to honey. It was weird because she never called me that. Even though it was weird, I didn't quiz her about it. I planned a surprise trip to the zoo and a place called the Garden of Eden. That morning, I woke her up with breakfast in bed and told her to call off because I had a surprise for her. She was actually inconvenienced and said she would get in trouble for calling off. I asked how that was possible if she hadn't taken a day off in years. She was stumped, so she just gave in and said she'd text her boss. She was blindfolded in the car, but only for a few minutes because she was too anxious to play along. This wasn't going at all how I pictured. When she saw the sign for the zoo, she looked like her worst fears were confirmed. I asked her why she looked so upset, so she just changed her expression, trying to seem excited. When she got out of the car, I caught a glimpse of her phone's lock screen with the preview of her boss's reply to her call off text. It said, "This is the 5th time this month." My wife had already called off work 5 times this month. I was shocked and confused. There was another text preview, but I couldn't read that one before my wife grabbed her phone. I didn't even know how to bring this up, so we just went along with our zoo visit. As we walked around and watched animals, it seemed like she was looking for something else. I saw her eyes light up when she finally caught sight of what she was searching for. She did everything she could to steer me in the opposite direction. I was confused and turned around, saying I knew she wanted to pet the giraffes. That's when a young man who worked at the zoo approached us, calling my wife by name. He was confused and looked hurt. He asked her why she was there and why she was with me. Talk about alarming. My heart was instantly racing, and I told him I was her husband. Her face looked like she wanted to cry, but she was too panicked. AP said she was his girlfriend and they'd been dating for the past 9 months. We both looked at her, demanding answers. She just slowly backed up until she started crying and running away. He chased her, but I did not. I was in disbelief. My wife had lied about working to CAP. How many times had they seen each other in the past 9 months? I can only assume it was many, many times. I left the zoo without my wife. When I got home, I threw her stuff out of the house since it wasn't legal for me to lock her out. She returned hours later in an Uber. That must have been an expensive ride. She tried to talk to me, but all I told her repeatedly was to get out. That was all I said to her, hoping to quickly diminish any hope she had that I would forgive her for cheating on me. She cried and wailed, telling me she had nowhere to go and that AP dumped her at the zoo because he didn't know she was married. That's when I said, "Good, you don't deserve to have a man take care of you if all you're going to do is cheat." My wife didn't have anywhere to go after she packed her car with her damp belongings, so she called the boss that just fired her earlier that day and explained everything. He had an apartment for rent above the pet store, but since she'd called off countless times in the past 9 months, he refused to help her out of this. I just snickered to myself, eavesdropping from the window of the house. My wife just drove away and didn't reach out to me again, even through the divorce. I was kind of bitter that she refused to give me answers or show any more remorse for what she did, but I realized she was definitely struggling and suffering through the consequences of what she'd done. Her refusing to contact me actually worked out better for me, so I wasn't tempted to rekindle our decade-long relationship. I needed to keep myself away so I could heal and accept what happened. I got to keep our home and animals because AP sent me proof of their affair. He was so upset with her for leading him on while she was married that he wanted to help me prove what kind of girl she was. Losing the animals was even harder for my wife than losing me or AP. Let this be a lesson to all that cheating never pays off. It only makes you a terrible person that doesn't deserve the things you had with your spouse. Opie, I am sorry your wife of 9 years started this affair. I know how frustrating it is to not have all the answers, but just remember these questions don't really matter. You know the end result, and that's enough to end the relationship. There isn't going to be an answer that makes this more forgivable. She probably met this guy on an app or at the zoo while you thought she was working. She is not a trustworthy woman. I don't know what challenges she'll have to face in life, but if she doesn't change her ways, it'll be a recipe for disaster. At least you won't be there for it, and you have a fresh start. A successful marriage always requires honesty without any secrets. Your ex started talking to another person behind your back, which is never a good idea. There's no reason to keep any relationship or communication secret from your spouse. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. I, 39, was set up with my wife, who is 40, by a mutual friend. The friend in question was her best friend, while I knew her because I was good friends with her brother and her to an extent. Despite being in similar circles, the two of us had never met or even knew of each other. At the time, I was going through a bit of a dry spell when it came to dating, so I decided to accept the blind date because why not? If it worked out, then great, but if it didn't work out, then so be it. I'd move on with my life, and the woman I was supposed to be going out with would as well. The date went well enough, and we agreed to go on a second date, followed by a third, a fourth, and, well, you get the idea. Admittedly, it might have been a bit of a whirlwind romance, because the two of us were considering marriage as early as 6 months in. I know it sounds crazy, but the two of us got along well. We had a lot in common, and never once did I feel forced when having a conversation with her. It always came naturally to us. So, when I decided that I was going to propose about 8 months in, it didn't seem to be a surprise to anyone. My family was a little hesitant at first and asked me if perhaps this wasn't too rushed, but at the very least, they were supportive of me. The same went for my wife's family. After we got married, we moved into a house my family was nice enough to give us. It had been in the family for a while, so it wasn't like we were rich or anything. Whichever child managed to get married first is whoever got the house. It sounds cruel, but there were no hard feelings when it came to this plan from any of my siblings. The two of us moved into the house and started doing what all newlyweds did, build a life together. About a year after getting married, my wife discovered she was pregnant, and we then added a baby girl to the household. Newborns can add a lot of stress to a relationship, and our daughter did, but we were managing to make it work, just like we were in our whirlwind romance to marriage. When her best friend got married, the two of us started going out on double dates with the two of them. It was nice because my wife and I didn't exactly have a lot of married friends to hang out with. Thinking back, I realize we mostly had single friends, but that happens sometimes when you get married young. A lot of people choose to wait and get married in their 30s. I always got along with my wife's best friend, and her husband was no different. Like us, they seemed like a great fit. They wanted a family, but weren't going to try yet because the two of them wanted to focus on their careers first. For the first few years of marriage, things seemed great. I don't think I even realized something was off because my wife was so good at saving face and keeping up the charade. Looking back at it now, I realize that this is the case. The one who pointed it out to me was my wife's best friend. She came to me one day, saying that she noticed her husband being very secretive lately. When she spied on him, she realized that the person he was talking to is none other than her best friend and my wife. It was hard to tell what they were saying most of the time, but she did hear a few inappropriate things come out of her husband's mouth, followed by a giggle from my wife on the other line. I didn't want to deal with it at first, and tried to come up with a bunch of reasons or excuses why she could have heard what she heard. The problem is, I couldn't come up with anything logical to explain what my wife's best friend was telling me. I decided to do a little spying of my own and came to the same conclusion as my wife's best friend did. We decided to talk to our spouses separately because it was the easiest way. I asked my wife first if she had something to tell me. When she acted confused, I pressed her about having an affair and then dropped the bomb that I knew who she was having an affair with too. At first, she tried to say that her own best friend was just trying to break up her marriage and was jealous of what we had. I told her she thought her husband was having an affair with her as well. We both had suspicions and had enough circumstantial evidence, as you will, to make eventually, my wife admitted that it was the truth. She had been having an affair with her best friend's husband for the past year. I was floored by the confession because I couldn't believe it had been going on for a year, and I had no idea this was the case. I didn't talk to my wife for a week. There was no forgiving her, but I was in a state of shock. Once the shock wore off, I told her we were over. She seemed sad. However, I doubted it was genuine. When I checked in with my wife's best friend, she said she was also going through with a divorce. Her husband seemed almost happy. So, the two of us divorced our cheating spouses and let them be together. I ended up keeping the house in the divorce, as well as primary custody of our daughter. My ex-wife moved in with the ex-husband of her best friend in the same house they used to share. The best friend didn't care because she wanted nothing to do with him and needed a clean break. Even when she moved out of town, the two of us kept in contact with one another. It was safe to say we were becoming good friends. My ex-wife and her had no further contact with each other, which was for the best. I only talked to her about our daughter because I didn't want her in my life any more than she had to be. One might think that because my ex ended up married to her AP and had an instant house, things were great. No, that was not the case at all. She ended up having 2 more kids with the AP in 3 years. Turns out the best friend not having kids with him was a good idea because the AP did nothing to help with them. To make matters worse for her, he was cheating on her. My daughter only went over there every other weekend, so thankfully he wasn't exposed to that chaos a lot. Besides our daughter, I had no communication with her, but she did try to get me to help me out with her 2 kids because she knew how good of a father I was to our daughter. These kids were nothing to me. They were hers and her AP's children, so I told her basically that it was her problem and she had to deal with it. Her former best friend thought this was hilarious when I told her. My ex was desperate, but she made her bed and it was time to lie in it. Opie, the first thing I have to say is that your ex-wife has some audacity to turn around and ask you to help with her 2 younger children. They might be your daughter's younger siblings, but they are nothing to you. Not to be cruel or anything, it's just the fact of the matter. She thought the two of them were going to live happily ever after when little did she know that she could have had a happy ending with you. Just keep parenting your daughter to the best of your ability and being there for her. Trust me when I say that she will appreciate it more than you can know. Your ex-wife is just going to have to deal with having 2 kids with a deadbeat who won't help and cheats on her. Her former best friend dodged a bullet by not having kids with the guy. If she had, I bet dollars to donuts, she would have ended up in the same situation as your ex, and obviously that's not a great situation to be in. Now, let's get into our next story for today. I, 50 male, thought that my wife, 50 female, and I had a pretty good relationship in the beginning. The two of us first met when we were in our early 20s in college. We struck up a friendship first before the two of us slowly started to date about 2 years into our friendship. Being friends with someone first is always a good idea because it's not like you don't know the person to an extent. However, dating someone brings a whole new level to a relationship, but that didn't happen with me and my wife. We shifted from friendship to romance pretty easily. The transition was so easy that it was almost a little scary. From there obviously came marriage. We dated for a few years and then decided it was time to get married. It was a mutual decision that saw us having a medium-sized wedding. Thankfully, both sets of parents were ready to help give some money towards the ceremony. Over the years, we bought a house and started having kids. We had our son followed by a second son 3 years later, and our last child 4 years after our second son. The last child was a girl. My wife was a good mother when they were younger, but once the kids got out of the toddler stage and began to grow into their personalities, she seemed to lose interest. It was like she was only good with them once they were in the baby and toddler stage because they needed her more. This was at least my mindset. It wasn't like she still wasn't a mother to them, but they always went towards me once they were old enough. If they needed something, Dad was the one who was going to do it. While I wasn't happy with it, this was just the way things happened to end up being in our household. By the time we hit our late 40s, our marriage was estranged. The youngest child was starting middle school, with the oldest being at college already. Our middle child would be going to college sooner rather than later. So that was another milestone we were getting too soon. I couldn't remember the last time my wife and I even had a date night, let alone were intimate with each other. Still, when we got married, I said for better or worse, I was going to stick it out no matter what. One day I asked my wife if maybe we could consider counseling, but she brushed it off saying it wasn't needed. It was by the time we were reaching the age of 50 that I was starting to get dejected with the whole situation. I wasn't happy, but I still wanted to try to have a genuine relationship with my wife. We had been through so much and had 3 children together. That seemed something worth fighting for. However, my wife had different ideas. Anytime I tried to get us to talk, she would rebuff me. Then I had to sit down and analyze her behavior. I wanted to try to figure out what was going on with her, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't figure it out. The one to figure out what was going on with my wife was our middle son. He took me aside one day and told me that he had been out running an errand when he saw my wife, his mother, kissing another man just out in the street. We lived in a city and not a small town, but it wasn't that big. There was still the chance of someone seeing them. For example, our literal children. That didn't seem to matter much to my wife. When I got a chance, I confronted her about it and even went to show her a video my son took when she started to deny it. This was when she got quiet. I asked her if she loved me anymore, and she said she fell out of love with me a long time ago. To say I was devastated was an understatement because I loved her. Even after all we had been through, I still loved her a lot. However, now that she had broken our vows, I saw no reason why I had to stick to them. It was for better or worse until someone stepped out of the marriage. I'm sorry, but there was no coming back from that at all. When it came to the kids, I wanted to tell them all at once that we were getting a divorce. My wife and I got on a group call and told them. They weren't surprised because our middle son had already told his other 2 siblings that he had found their mother cheating. Sides were picked, and they picked mine. My wife accused me of trying to turn the kids against her, but I reminded her that she did that all on her own. It was her choice to cheat and break up the family, so she had no one to blame but herself. The divorce was a bitter one. It was decided we'd sell the house and each take half. Honestly, I didn't even want it anymore. There were too many memories in the house, most of which I didn't want to remember. Once the divorce was final and the house was sold, I got a condo with my half of the money that was close to my oldest son, who was starting a family of his own with his girlfriend. They weren't pregnant yet, but were trying, and I was very excited. My kids completely cut my now ex-wife off. She was angry, but she had begun pulling away from them ages ago, so I don't know what else she expected. Throw in the fact that she cheated on me, and it was safe to say our kids wouldn't want to be involved with my ex for a long time, if ever. She moved on with the AP as I expected. He was unknown to me, but I guess they had been neighbors when they were younger. Thanks to Facebook, they were able to reconnect before engaging in an affair about a little over a year before we divorced officially. To no one's surprise, the AP ended up cheating on my wife. In response, my wife got drunk, jumped in her car, and attempted to drive to his house, but ended up being caught on the way. The result? She was charged with a DUI. I was shocked at this behavior because she had never done such a thing while we were together. I honestly didn't feel any pity for my ex because she had done it to herself, after all. All of this she had done to herself. Her parents ended up bailing her out, though she did attempt to ask our children and even me. We all refused. Calling my ex-in-laws was the last resort because they were very judgmental and would hold it against my ex-wife. She ended up getting off with a slap on the wrist since it was her first offense, but the fact that it happened in general was embarrassing for her. Again, I was done with my ex-wife, so there was no sympathy for her. My ex had chosen her AP over her children, and that was just how it was going to be. When our son and his girlfriend finally did get pregnant and have a child, she attempted to show up at the hospital. I had no idea how she found out, but it was a shock to see her there. In a matter of seconds, she was shooed away and shouted the entire time she was being led out of the hospital. Thankfully, neither our son nor his girlfriend were aware of the encounter, which I was grateful for. Maybe if she seemed genuinely sorry for her behavior, our son would change his mind, but until then, she would not see our grandkid. Opie, I do admire you for trying to work on your marriage, even when it seemed like there was no hope. You truly did believe in your vows, because I also believe when you do get married, it's for life. Unless, of course, something happens such as cheating. You did what you had to do, and I'm glad your kids had your back. It's a shame that your son had to see his mother cheating on his father, as well as go on to tell you what had happened. No child should have to tell their parents such a thing. The DUI serves her right. Perhaps she was going through some midlife crisis which caused her to act like this. Or it could have always been there, and it just took a situation like this for it to come to light. Overall, keep doing what you're doing. Also, congrats on your new grandchild. I wish you and all your family the best. Take the time to heal, because eventually,